Francesco De Ferrari, it's very good to talk to you.
Tiki, very nice to meet you.
Now, you were paid well in Asia. I've got to ask, after this annus horribilis at AMP, why would you take the job?
That's a very interesting question, Tiki, and a question I get a lot. I really found that this was a unique opportunity when David approached me because I have a non-traditional finance background. I started out outside of finance. I was an entrepreneur with my own businesses, and then I spent 17 years at Credit Suisse building very successful wealth businesses around the world. And then this opportunity came out of left field with AMP, and it really struck a few very important chords. One is I truly identified with the sense of purpose of this company. And the other is I like change and I love disruption. And so this is a unique opportunity to do something, build a new financial model that I think the world desperately needs. And especially the ability, after having spent 17 years making wealthy people wealthier, the ability to bring that knowledge and experience and be able to deliver to the average Australian for whom it matters the most.
Wow, okay, so that's quite a purpose you've got yourself there. David Murray looked at you, he saw that entrepreneurial streak, success and failure as well, wasn't there?
No, absolutely, and I think in life you learn a lot more from your failures than you do for your successes, and a lot of that crystallized for me when I was running my own businesses. And so I think it's hard if you fail in life late, because then it's harder to pick yourself up. And I'm a believer that you need to fail fast, learn from your mistakes and move on. So definitely failures have been a very important part of my career.
So you've got a 3-year strategy now that you're implementing. Is it tougher than you thought?
It is challenging, and I think the Royal Commission, the political election, everything has added a level of complexity to the job, but when you have a higher level mission, you stay very focused on this higher purpose and the resolve, and so I am not unmoved from achieving my objectives.
So we've heard, I think, why Chairman David Murray chose you. You've dealt with financial crises, your own values, you've worked with Mother Teresa, for goodness sake, but how can you drive your culture through an organisation like AMP, which has, frankly, been exposed as so flawed?
Yes, so last year was a very difficult year for the company because most employees come to AMP true to its sense of purpose with the main value of help. We're here to help customers, and I truly believe that most of our employees have this DNA in mind. But clearly, if we look at the business going forward, our culture has to adapt as well. And so I firmly believe that a big part of our transformation has to do with the business model, but also the culture. And if you look at how this will play out, we need to adapt our culture to be more agile and more entrepreneurial as we go forward.
Okay, but just hitting you up with it, the brand AMP, the reputation was smashed by the Royal Commission, charging for financial advice that wasn't received, charging dead people for insurance. You've got 2 class actions. How do you come back from that?
Well, there was clearly a lot of behavior that was not acceptable and that we need to rectify very quickly, but I still firmly believe, if you look at the numbers, that what this company does matters for most Australians, and that's a really strong place to start from. I was actually very surprised. I think in my first week here, I attended in December our AMP Tomorrow Makers Foundation, and I was really surprised by the level of how AMP has touched most Australians. Somebody has a relative who's worked here, has one of the insurance policies or their superannuation. There is generally widespread support to see AMP gain back its rightful place.
AMP has been referred, along with other institutions, for possible civil and criminal prosecution. Now, AMP stands accused of misleading the regulator. Again, David Murray picked you for your reputation of working with regulators, finding solutions. Last month, AMP admitted wrongdoing in insurance churning to the regulator, and you've also agreed to hand over documents to ASIC. This is quite a change, isn't it?
It is quite a change, and we are obviously all in a very difficult situation. I think the industry is. The regulators equally have the same amount of public pressure to try to right some of the wrongs of the past. And so for me, I've always held the opinion that the only way out of it, we both want the same thing. And so while we are today seemingly more divided, the only way we solve this for the right of the country is to come together in partnership and find a mutually acceptable way forward.
So you're confident about your ongoing work with the regulator?
We definitely work in strong partnerships with both ASIC and APRA, because that is the only way we can solve the right thing for the country.
Francesco, one impact of the Hayne Royal Commission is that people are getting out of financial advice. You know, big banks are selling financial advice, other businesses are going to the wall. How serious is this Australia-wide, do you think?
I think it's very serious, and it's something that in the heat of the Royal Commission probably wasn't talked about enough. One of the unintended consequences of something like this, I am very worried about the fact that financial advice is becoming, especially face-to-face advice, more expensive and will be out of the reach of the average Australian. And from my limited experience of having immigrated here 6 months ago, this is a very complicated country in which to navigate. And so people really need good financial advice to put their affairs in order. And so I am worried that the larger players are seeing this as too difficult to fix.
Okay.
On the other hand, for us, it's a further resolve that we want to do this, and for us it's mission critical to find the right way forward.
All right. You have worked around the world looking at other places. For example, in Britain, where they've gone through a cleansing process post the financial crisis, there are now questions about where are the financial advisors. Equally, what's your experience in Japan?
I think both in the UK, in Japan, in Europe, especially when MiFID came out at the end of 2008, we went through in these countries the same thing Australia is going through now. And I think it's very important that in Australia we now take a step back and we look at the learnings from these countries to avoid making the same mistakes again, because they are facing a reversal of some of this legislation to make sure that people are getting the right type of financial advice.
Right, so that's what they're doing actually. They're actually changing the laws that have been put in.
Well, a lot of the world reacted to the global financial crisis, and usually when there's such a strong crisis, you get an opposite reaction, and then after a while, people look at the unintended consequences and the pendulum swings back at the middle. I think in Australia we have a unique opportunity, again with this partnership with the regulators, to ensure that we take some of these learnings.
So you've said before that AMP, given its scale, the mission critical that you have, you've talked about you as the last man standing really in this game, and you've got to get it right.
Absolutely. Now we have businesses that are less impacted by this. We have an asset management business with AMP Capital, and we have a bank which still continue to perform well, but clearly the Australian wealth management business is where we'll need to deliver these solutions.
How important is scale to your survival and to the turnaround? Because I say financial planners are going to the wall right now.
And it's not just the Royal Commission, it is also the new FASEA professional standards, which are going to push a significant uplift in professionalism. My experience has been, and I went through a very similar process with a very similar organization in Italy in 2008. And where this ultimately came out is that quality is going to be more important than quantity, especially as we need to rebuild trust, one client interaction at a time.
So obviously your strategy is a work in progress. If I take you down to the level of your financial planners, your staff, and your aligned financial planners, they're dealing with the end of trailing commissions. What is your message to them as to how you're going to involve them going forward?
Well, essentially that our aligned network has brought the company to where it is today. And so for me, in any situation we approach, I've told the team, we have to be very proud of our past, because it is what built this company so far. But if we want to be optimistic about the future, we have to be very realistic about where we are in the present and to face into the issues and work through them one by one. And so financial advisors are a critical partner in getting this right, and we need to accompany them in a pretty significant industry disruption that they're going through as well.
So what does that mean? Because, I mean, they're now going to have a lot of focus on what is in the best interest of the client. Again, how do you get that culture through to them on the ground?
Well, the reality is I think the good financial advisors are already there today. My experience, again, going back to Italy, is that when you shift this model to be more focused around the customer and around managing conflicts properly through the business model, in Italy, when we went through this change, around 30% of the advisors did not make it through the other end. So I'm also very realistic about that. But the ones who did and who ran a truly value-adding and ethical model made it out the other end a lot stronger. But it will be a period of disruption in between, and so we have to stay very close to them.
So, Francesco, Kenneth Hayne and the Productivity Commission called out retail funds, including AMP, for their high fees and their poor returns. How are you going to stem the outflows? I think your last quarterly number was 1.8 billion in net cash outflows. So
outflows clearly are disappointing. I think, as anything, we then need to look at the facts one level below the headline. And so we've been operating 170 years. We generally have a much older client base than some of the newer competitors, and so half our outflows are actually pension payments to Australians.
As compared to, say, industry super funds.
Yes, in Australians who've retired, and so those outflows are part of the service. We're paying pensions out to people, so they are a structural part of our business.
Nevertheless, there's still a big outflow.
There are still outflows, and obviously the Royal Commission has accelerated these. We need to fix the problem, the products and services where we are not delivering value, and the way we rebuild trust is one client interaction at a time. So it's very easy to lose trust. It takes a lot of time to rebuild it, and that's why this is not an immediate process.
Can you do it in 3 years?
I firmly believe we can.
So why shouldn't the average Australian now head straight for industry super?
Well, that's a good question. I think consumers have to understand what they're choosing and what they want from their investments, and then they should have all the relevant information to make the right decisions. I firmly believe that there is a place in superannuation for retail players, because if you look at how complex the financial industry is, there's a lot of disruption and there's a lot of innovation that's coming. To go after this innovation, we are investing and using shareholder capital, and shareholders who are conscious that they are in a risk-return trade-off. The other players that are not for profit need to use the retirement money of members to fund that innovation, which might succeed or might not succeed.
So then they've got their duties, their trustee duties, haven't they, I guess?
And that's right. So I firmly believe that in order to keep the market competitive, retail funds and retail players have a very important role to play.
So, Francesco, the insurance sale was obviously done before you arrived. You talked briefly about your other assets, AMP Capital and AMP Bank. They're both growing. You are a growth man from your Asia story. Where do you see the balance, the mix of business in 3 years' time?
Well, the reality is we used to be a business that was more concentrated on one end. Today we have a much more balanced business model, and I think advice, bank, and AMP Capital both have a very important and equal role to play if we are really to solve for the main problem that we're solving, which is the financial well-being of our customers. Not just in superannuation, but also in Australia, home ownership is very important. And so being able to offer simple and cost-effective and value-adding mortgages is also a very important service.
And are we going to see low fees for some products in financial advice from AMP?
We are definitely going. So with the fact that financial advice is becoming more expensive and less affordable, if we are true to our mission to make a difference for the average Australian, we need to come up with a business model as to how to deliver a more appropriate advice for the smaller customers. That will definitely need to come with a segmentation as to how we offer advice and with a significant more use of technology.
So your priorities now?
So my priorities right now is to nail down the 3-year strategy and all its components, to get the board to approve that, and then to start working quickly on implementing and making the first steps so that we can restart to rebuild customer trust. The other big priority is changing our culture. And my experience by having gone through transformation and such big industry disruption is you always need a North Star to point all your employees towards. And so my experience has been, if you cut out all the noise, I've told our teams there are 3 questions that you need to answer. One is, would you be doing what you're doing if this were your own company? Would you be investing the money that we're investing if you're funding it out of your own wallet? And most importantly, are you willing to buy the products and services if you're on the other side of the sales conversation? That is the type of cultural change that we need to drive, and we need to start answering yes to all these questions in every single customer interaction.
What is David Murray like as a chair?
David has had a fantastic career in Australia. He is a very bright thinker, and he is very courageous because he chose somebody like me as a CEO and is definitely putting a lot of effort around changing AMP.
Finally, for investors in AMP, 700,000 plus shareholders, share price is now, I think, about $2.17. Can you get it back to $5.25, where I think your big incentives kick in because you're way out of the money?
I hear you. I think the matter of my compensation is more a matter for the chairman to discuss, but I think it reflects my glass half full attitude. I firmly believe we can turn this company around, and it's not an easy journey, but I think that will prove very satisfactory over the long term. I think we can build a very unique business model as long as we stay true to our core mission.
Francesco De Ferrari, it has been great. Thank you so much for the time.
Tiki, thank you very much.